I was accused of abusing my daughter while I was 6,000 miles away on active duty in Iraq. My wife used the court system to steal custody while I was dodging mortar fire. My name is David Ellis. I'm 39 years old, a master sergeant with the 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I've been in the Army for 17 years, 2 tours in Afghanistan, one in Kuwait, and now Iraq. This isn't my first deployment. I know the rhythm of sand and silence, the feel of a Kevlar helmet settling on your head before sunrise, the sound of a diesel engine coughing to life in the dark. What I wasn't prepared for was the quiet way a life can fall apart without a single gunshot. I'm originally from Tallahassee. My father ran a hardware store until he passed, and my mom taught English at the local middle school. I joined the Army at 22 after college didn't feel right and a construction job couldn't keep my attention. I liked the structure, the weight of a uniform, the clarity of mission. I met Melissa on leave in 2011, back when I still thought marriage was about shared dreams instead of mutual endurance. She worked at a pediatric clinic, liked painting in the evenings, made great lasagna. We got married a year later. Emily was born in 2014, and for a while things were good. Simple. She made our house a home while I kept the lights on. We were 11 years in when I deployed this last time. Emily was 9 and already acting too grown up for bedtime stories. Melissa had stopped crying at airports. She just hugged me, whispered, "Be safe," and handed me a bag of snacks for the flight. I took it, smiled, and tried not to notice the way her arms didn't linger when she let go. I figured it was just another deployment, that the distance was temporary. I was wrong. The Army teaches you to pack light, move fast, and never assume anything is secure just because it was yesterday. But I assumed my family was fine. I assumed love, once built, stayed built. I thought if I provided, protected, and came home when I could, that would be enough. But there are things you can't defend against, not from halfway across the world, not from someone who knows exactly how to make it all look like your fault. The first sign didn't come in the form of an explosion or a letter. It came in an email, buried under command updates and supply reports. A name I didn't recognize in the sender line. Subject, custody and protective action. I remember staring at the words without absorbing them, the way your mind blanks when something vital starts to break. I didn't open it right away, just closed the laptop, stood up from the bunk, and walked outside into the heat. The air smelled like dust and engine grease. I stood there for a long time just breathing, hands on my hips, boots sinking slowly into the gravel. I didn't know yet what Melissa had done, but I felt it in my chest. That cold, hollow shift when something you love starts slipping away. I opened the email 12 hours later. I just finished a 16-hour rotation escorting supply convoys through Al Anbar and wanted 5 minutes of quiet before racking out. Instead, I got a digital punch to the gut. It started with a firm, clipped greeting to Master Sergeant David Ellis. Then came the words that knocked the breath out of me. Please be advised that a temporary emergency custody order has been granted to Melissa Ellis, citing concerns of emotional instability and repeated incidents of verbal aggression toward the minor child, Emily Ellis. It reads like a script, polished, clinical, and completely detached from the reality of who I am and where I was. According to the court, I had apparently been a danger to my daughter while I was deployed overseas under a Department of Defense order. There was no mention of where these incidents occurred, no dates, no supporting evidence. Just a rubber stamp from a county judge in North Carolina and the suffocating weight of being labeled something I knew I wasn't. I didn't yell, didn't slam my laptop shut. I just sat there, my bunk creaking under me, the hum of diesel generators droning through the canvas walls. In our line of work, panic doesn't help. Neither does anger. You assess, you verify, you respond. Emotions come later, if at all. I reread the email, then check the attached documents, emergency order, protective motion, declaration from Melissa, handwritten, swearing under oath that I had unpredictable mood swings, that Emily would flinch when I called, and that she was terrified about me returning home. That part hit hardest. Emily and I had a ritual. Every Sunday video call, no matter the time zone. We'd play virtual chess. She'd giggle at my terrible impressions. Last I saw her, she was drawing pictures of me riding a camel through the desert. That girl wasn't afraid. That girl cried when I told her I'd be gone for 6 months. Now she was scared of me? Number, she wasn't. I knew my daughter. Someone had written those words for her, or worse, forced her to say them. And the court had listened, believed it, signed off on a complete custody switch without even contacting my command, without confirming where I was when these so-called incidents happened. The worst part wasn't the accusation. It was the silence around it. No call from Melissa, no warning, no hint. Just a one-sided legal ambush, served cold. That night, I pulled up my deployment logs. Every patrol, every briefing, every hour accounted for. I took screenshots, saved them, organized them by date. I wasn't just going to prove I was innocent. I was going to make sure they remembered how easily the truth can be weaponized, and how calm a man can stay when the stakes are everything. The next morning, I skipped chow and walked out past the tents toward the edge of the FOB. Just needed space. Sand stretched for miles in every direction, broken only by blast walls and the rusted frame of a burnt-out Humvee. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, the sun already cooking the back of my neck, and tried to feel anything other than the slow churn building in my chest. I'd faced ambushes, insurgents, but this was something else. This was personal, and it was coming from home, the place that was supposed to be the anchor in all this chaos. Ellis! I turned to see Lieutenant Corwin jogging up. He slowed, catching his breath. You good? I nodded. Yeah. He looked at me for a second, like he didn't buy it, but didn't push. Need anything? No, sir. He gave a short nod and walked off. That's the thing about soldiers. We don't pry unless it's life or death. Everyone's carrying something out here. You learn to spot the weight, but not ask about it. Back in the tent, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not to Melissa, to my JAG contact from Kuwait, a guy named Ken Whitaker. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, but I knew he'd help me sort this out the right way. I laid it out in simple terms. My deployment dates, the court order, and the accusation. I ended the message with 2 words, need advice. Then I logged into the Army Secure portal and requested copies of my deployment logs through official channels. I already had screenshots, but this needed to be airtight, time-stamped, chain of command verified. Melissa's lawyer wanted to play games in a North Carolina courtroom. Fine. Let them read the part where I was on a forward operating base with 0 comms the night she claimed I yelled at Emily through the phone. Let them see that I hadn't been in the U.S. for 4 straight months. I didn't sleep much that night, not from anger or even worry, just stillness. That cold, focused kind of stillness that comes when you know you've crossed into new terrain. The enemy wasn't out here in the desert anymore. It was back home, wearing my last name. Around 3 a.m., I finally laid down and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't stop thinking about Emily, her laugh, her favorite blue hoodie, the way she used to run to the window when I got home on leave. And now some lawyer was telling a judge that I scared her, that I didn't deserve to hear her voice. Number, I wasn't going to let this go. And I wasn't going to let her grow up thinking that silence means guilt. A week passed before I heard back from Ken. He called me directly through the secure line in the comms room, a privilege we didn't usually get unless it was urgent. His voice came through low and calm, the way military lawyers talk when they already know you've been screwed. David, I reviewed everything. What she filed isn't just thin, it's hollow. No police reports, no prior complaints, and no witness statements. Just her word. But that was enough for the emergency custody ruling. I didn't say anything at first. I just pressed the receiver tighter to my ear. She used your deployment to blindside you, Ken continued. Filed it 2 days after you went radio silent for training. The judge signed it the same afternoon. It made sense now. Melissa had timed it perfectly. Waited until she knew I couldn't respond, couldn't appear, couldn't defend myself. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. I thanked Ken, promised to send the official deployment logs as soon as they cleared, and hung up. Later that night, I laid out the last year in my head like a mission timeline. The signs were all there. Melissa had been changing before I left. Small shifts that felt like friction, but not alarms. She stopped visiting the base with Emily, said the drive was too much. She used to text me selfies or little videos of them baking cookies. That slowed, then stopped altogether. I remember she started going to yoga classes at night, though she hated yoga. Girls' weekends to Asheville with friends I'd never met. Her phone, once casually open, became a locked screen. I asked once, joking, "Got state secrets in there?" She smiled but never answered. I should have seen it. Not the custody plot, maybe, but the drift, the buildup, the feeling that I was becoming a background character in my own marriage. Still, I wanted to believe it was just the usual strain. Military families go through rough patches. Deployments stretch you thin. I didn't cheat, didn't lie, didn't raise my voice. I thought that counted for something. I thought loyalty bought peace. But Melissa had been building a case, not a legal one, a narrative, to friends, maybe to family, that I was distant, volatile, that Emily was nervous around me. I could picture her laying the groundwork, one careful sentence at a time. So when she filed that emergency motion, the court wouldn't see a blindside. They'd see a mother acting out of fear. What scared me most wasn't the lie. It was how easy it had been to make it look like the truth. And Emily, my daughter, 9 years old enough to feel everything, too young to explain any of it. I didn't know what Melissa had told her, what story she'd built, but I knew I needed to reach her again. Not through a screen, not through lawyers, but with something no one could fake. The truth, documented, measured, and ready. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. Not from nightmares, just calculation. My brain wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face on our last video call. She was wearing her favorite hoodie, the one with the tiny rocket ships, telling me about a science project at school. That was 3 weeks before Melissa filed the emergency order. No fear in her voice, no tension. Just my daughter being a kid. Now I wasn't allowed to call her, not even a video message. The court order said contact had to go through Melissa's attorney, pending further review. I knew what that meant. They wanted to starve the bond between us, make it easier to claim it didn't exist when it came time to finalize custody. But they underestimated me. I didn't get loud. I didn't write some emotional email to Melissa begging for an explanation. That's not how I operate. You don't charge into an ambush, you flank it. You wait. You gather intelligence. Then you strike when it counts. So I started prepping. The first thing I did was make a timeline. Every deployment date, every training window, every patrol I'd run over the last 6 months. I matched that against the claims Melissa made in her affidavit. One incident, she said, had occurred on the second Friday of March when I allegedly screamed at Emily during a video call and caused her to cry uncontrollably. Problem was, I was on a blackout operation that night. No communications, no calls. Nothing. The logs proved it. I pulled screenshots, request logs, and confirmation reports from our battalion's mission records. I saved everything twice, on a secure drive and on a backup USB. Then I reached out to Sergeant Yates, our unit clerk, and asked him to start gathering affidavits from my squad, people who'd seen me day in and day out during deployment, not just for character reference, but to physically place me on base during the dates Melissa claimed I was emotionally volatile or unreachable in a crisis. I also made contact with my sister back in Florida, Rachel. She and I hadn't been especially close in recent years, but she loved Emily and never liked Melissa much. I asked her to try and check in. Not push, just visit. Maybe drop off some school supplies, something normal. I needed someone on the ground, someone to look Emily in the eye and tell me if she was okay. Rachel didn't ask questions, just said, "Got it." The hardest part of all of it was the waiting for emails to come through, for documents to be processed, for the right moment to push back. But I knew how to wait. The Army teaches you patience in ways no civilian life ever will. And as I sat on the edge of my bunk one night, thumbing through the photos Emily had mailed me before all this, drawings of our house, the family dog, a stick figure of us holding hands, I made myself a promise. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. But it wasn't going to look like yelling or chaos. It was going to look like evidence, strategy, silence with a spine. They let me dial in from a plywood room 2 tents over from the comms shack. The connection was glitchy, the lighting harsh, and the courtroom on the other end felt like a different planet. Polished wood, suits, marble walls, and my life being dissected in real time by people who'd never met me. The judge was a middle-aged man with silver glasses and the kind of voice that lets you know he didn't have time for drama. Melissa was seated next to her lawyer, calm, composed, in a soft blue blouse she used to wear on Sundays, the same one she'd worn to my promotion ceremony 3 years ago. That twisted something in my chest. Her lawyer spoke first, cool, confident, said they were seeking to formalize the emergency custody order on the basis of emotional instability and habitual aggression. Referred to Melissa as a resilient mother acting in her child's best interest. Said I'd been unreachable for extended periods, and that Emily was fearful of her father's return. I waited. The judge turned to the monitor where I sat. Boots laced, uniform pressed. Master Sergeant Ellis, do you have a response? I leaned forward, kept my voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. I've submitted my official deployment logs for the last 6 months. They're time-stamped and verified by the Department of Defense. They include locations, comms blackouts, and duty rosters. I'd like the court to review them against the dates in the plaintiff's sworn statement. He nodded to the clerk, who confirmed receipt. I continued. One of the incidents mentioned, the one on March 10th, she claims I yelled at my daughter on a video call and caused her distress. I was embedded with a transport convoy that day. We were on blackout protocol, no calls, no internet, no contact with the outside world. I have multiple witnesses and command logs to verify that. Melissa shifted in her seat. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I added, there are several other inconsistencies I'm prepared to address. But for now, I respectfully request the court verify the timeline. That's all I ask. The judge studied me for a moment, then turned back to the documents. Silence settled like dust. Melissa's lawyer whispered something to her, but her face had changed. She wasn't smiling anymore. 10 minutes later, the judge leaned forward. These documents are clear, he said. They show your deployment activity in full. The court will need to reevaluate the standing custody arrangement. Emergency orders are not to be used as pretext. I'm ordering a temporary lift on the no contact clause. You may resume communication with your daughter pending further review. I didn't react, not in front of them. I just said, yes, sir, and the screen went dark. Back in the tent, I exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not the end, not yet, but the tide had turned. And for the first time in months, I was allowed to say 3 simple words I'd been holding in for far too long. Hi, Emily. Daddy's here. The first time Emily picked up the call again, it was short, 32 seconds. She looked small on the screen, like the camera had been propped up on a kitchen counter. Her face was hesitant, like she didn't know what was okay to say. Melissa wasn't in frame, but I could feel her presence like static in the room. Hi, Daddy, Emily said quietly. Hi, Bug, I replied, forcing a smile. How's your science project coming along? She shrugged. We had to pick new ones. Oh, why? Mom said mine was too much work. She glanced off screen. I didn't push. Didn't ask what that meant. Just told her I was proud of her and that I missed her, then let her go when she mumbled she had to get ready for bed. Even though it was just after 6 p.m., I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the dark screen for a long time. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't just about a custody battle anymore. It was about narrative. Melissa had started writing a version of reality where I was the unstable parent, the unreliable one. She'd been laying the groundwork for months, maybe longer. And if I didn't take control of the story soon, it would become fact. The logs were my foot in the door, but I needed more. Something undeniable. And I found it in the one place she probably forgot existed, our shared cloud drive. Melissa never changed the password. Maybe she thought I was too busy or too far away to care. But I logged in and found photos, audio notes, even journal entries she dictated into her phone and saved by accident. One in particular caught my attention. The file name was nothing, just a string of numbers and letters. But when I hit play, I heard her voice. Jeremy thinks we should do it this week while he's still overseas. The judge will understand. He said they usually side with the mom anyway, especially if the dad can't even show up. She trailed off, then laughed. A low, uncomfortable laugh I didn't recognize. Jeremy. So there it was. A name. A presence I hadn't confirmed until now. I downloaded the file, time-stamped it, backed it up twice. That was the leverage I needed. I sent it to Ken, along with a message. Thought you want this in the folder. Might change the tone in court next week. His reply came 10 minutes later. That'll do, Sergeant. That'll do just fine. I didn't celebrate, just sat in the corner of the tent, listening to the generator's hum and the faint sounds of men playing cards 2 tables over. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Melissa anymore. It was about protecting my daughter from the lie being built around her and making sure the truth had its day, even if it had to fight its way into the light. The next piece of the puzzle came from my sister. Rachel had driven up to Fayetteville under the pretense of dropping off a birthday gift for Emily. She kept it casual, brought cupcakes, took a few photos, and didn't press. But later that night, she called me, her voice tense. "She's not okay, David," she said. "Emily's quiet, not scared exactly, just careful, like she's walking on glass." I didn't speak, just let her talk. And there's a man there, tall, smug, drives a black Range Rover. Melissa introduced him as her friend Jeremy, but he had a toothbrush in the bathroom, a pair of shoes by the back door. He's not visiting. He lives there. There it was. Confirmation. Not that I needed it. The audio file already told me most of the story. But now I could connect the dots. Jeremy wasn't just some new boyfriend. He was part of the plan. I started digging, nothing fancy, just open source searches, a few online background checks. Turned out Jeremy Clark was a chiropractor, recently divorced. His ex had filed for primary custody of their 2 boys a year earlier. On what grounds? Instability and emotional coercion, according to the case record, the same language Melissa used in her affidavit against me. What's more, Jeremy's practice was struggling. A few bad reviews, a malpractice settlement that didn't quite make the papers, and a recent lien on his business property. He was going under. That's when it hit me. Melissa hadn't just turned on me because she was unhappy. She'd aligned herself with someone who needed what I had: stability, benefits, a clean slate. And the only way to have that without me was to erase me, paint me as the unstable one, the absentee, the threat. Take my daughter, take my reputation, and maybe in the process, cash in whatever she could from the house and the VA support system I'd spent nearly 2 decades earning. I sent all of it to Ken, court documents, lien filings, even a screenshot of Jeremy's car parked in my driveway from a publicly accessible neighborhood traffic cam archive. He responded in less than an hour. This isn't just custody drama anymore. This is character fraud, manipulation, and potentially conspiracy if we can show intent. Can we? I asked during our next secure call. Ken's tone shifted. With what we have now? Maybe, but we need more. Something with Emily, something recorded or documented that shows she's being coached. Or worse. I nodded slowly, knowing exactly who I had to ask. Rachel. Not to put Emily in the middle, not to make her a witness, but to help her tell the truth in her own time, in her own words. Because I knew my daughter. She didn't lie. She didn't fake fear. And she didn't forget the father who kissed her forehead before every deployment and promised, "No matter where I go, I'll always come back to you." Now it was time to keep that promise. Rachel didn't need convincing. The moment I asked, she simply said, "I'll find a way." 2 days later, she texted me a photo of a book, Emily's favorite, Charlotte's Web, and said, "Check page 74. At first, I thought it was code. Then I noticed the corner of a folded piece of paper sticking out just past the spine. Rachel had found a way to visit again. She brought over new art supplies and a book she told Melissa she'd borrowed from Emily months ago. She gave Emily a gentle moment to slip something inside before handing it back and walking away. When I opened the scanned page she sent, I didn't see words from the book. I saw a note, messy, innocent handwriting, the kind only a child can make. "Daddy, I miss you. I didn't say those things. Mommy says if I tell anyone, they'll take me away. Please don't be mad. I love you. I read it twice, then a third time. My hands trembled, not from anger, from grief. Emily wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what would happen if she spoke the truth, that her world would collapse, that she'd lose both of us. And Melissa, someone she trusted, someone who was supposed to protect her, had weaponized that fear. I sent the letter to Ken with no subject line, just the scan. 10 minutes later, he called. "We can use this," he said. "Not as a public exhibit, not yet, but to request a full custody review. The judge will see the handwriting, the tone. It's real." I said nothing for a long time. "David?" he prompted. "She's just a kid," I said. "She shouldn't have to carry this." "She won't," he replied. "Not alone." The next morning, I filed an emergency motion through Ken to reopen the custody case. We included the note, the deployment logs, the audio file, and a summary of Jeremy Clark's history. Everything was factual. No drama, no emotion, just the pattern. A clear, traceable line showing how a father had been erased while serving his country, and how a daughter had been coached to play along. The court granted the motion. A new hearing was scheduled for the following week. This time, I'd be allowed to appear via secure video with full testimony. Melissa's lawyer tried to delay, filed a motion claiming psychological distress. It was denied. As the day approached, I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I didn't need to. The truth was already lined up in evidence, time stamped and signed. But more than that, I had Emily's words, not whispered through a phone, not filtered through lawyers, written in her own hand, folded between pages of a story where the underdog wins. That was enough. Melissa never saw it coming. She thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd fold under the weight of distance and bureaucracy, that being overseas meant I'd be too far, too late, too powerless to fight back. But I wasn't the same man who left home 6 months ago. I wasn't operating on hope anymore. I was moving on intel. The night before the hearing, I went through every file again. Deployment logs, call records, bank statements. I had a new entry too, 2 withdrawals from our joint account to an unfamiliar Venmo username. Small amounts, but they added up. I looked into it. The account belonged to Jeremy Clark. Melissa had been sending him money, quietly but consistently. The same man now living in the house I bought, eating off the dishes I'd picked out with Emily, sleeping in the bed where my daughter used to crawl in during thunderstorms. That changed things. I forwarded the information to Ken, along with a note. "He's not just in the picture, he's on payroll." Ken replied instantly. "Got it. Building it into the timeline now." The day of the hearing, I sat alone in the secure comms room, uniform pressed, everything still around me but my hands. Melissa was on screen again, this time looking less polished. Her hair wasn't brushed the same. She looked tired, worried. Her lawyer spoke first, less confident now, asked to dismiss the hearing on the grounds that this process was creating unnecessary emotional strain for the child. Ken stood up and calmly submitted the documents. The judge flipped through them silently. Deployment logs, check. Child's note, check. Audio file, check. Venmo transfers, check. Then came the affidavit from my commanding officer confirming my assignments during every date Melissa alleged misconduct. Ken's voice was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, my client is not just being falsely accused. He's being strategically removed. The evidence shows a coordinated attempt to eliminate parental rights for the benefit of a third party, one with a documented history of instability." Melissa looked straight ahead. Not at me, not at the screen. Just forward, like if she didn't blink, it wouldn't be real. The judge folded his hands and sighed. This case isn't about who wins or loses. It's about what's true. And based on the evidence presented, the emergency custody order was granted under false pretenses. That order is now vacated. Ken stayed stone-faced. I didn't smile. There was no victory lap, just a quiet breath I'd been holding since the day I read that first email. The judge continued. Custody will revert to joint status immediately, with additional conditions to ensure the emotional well-being of the child. A psychological evaluation of both parties is ordered, and the court will revisit full custody in 90 days. It wasn't over, but it was a beginning. Later that evening, Melissa's lawyer reached out. He wanted to meet. Privately, so I agreed. And when we sat across from each other on a secure call, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just handed him the deployment logs and let the silence speak for itself. Melissa didn't come to the meeting. Her lawyer did. Clean suit, tired eyes, the kind of expression that tells you he's starting to regret the client he's tied himself to. We met over a secure video platform set up through Ken's office. I was still on base, back in the same concrete-walled comms room, seated in front of a webcam beneath flickering fluorescent light. He started talking right away. Look, Sergeant Ellis, I think we can agree this situation's escalated beyond what either side expected. My client, he hesitated, was emotional, misguided, but not malicious. I didn't interrupt, just listened. She's concerned now about Emily, he continued. This back and forth, it's hard on a child. Maybe we can find a compromise. Something quiet, private, a clean co-parenting agreement. Ken, sitting beside me on screen, leaned forward. Are you proposing a settlement? The man nodded. Yes. Melissa is willing to rescind all prior accusations and statements made under oath in exchange for a no-fault custody agreement, shared legal and physical custody, with staggered holidays and no retroactive legal action pursued. I stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I pulled out a folder and held it up to the camera. Have you read the deployment logs? He nodded once. And the audio file, her voice, talking about timing it while I was overseas? His jaw tightened. Yes. Then you know this wasn't just emotional. This was planned. He said nothing. I set the folder down. I'm not interested in punishing Melissa. I'm not even sure I care what happens to her anymore. But I care about Emily. I care about what she was told, what she had to write in that note. I won't pretend that didn't happen. He looked down. I've kept this quiet so far, I continued. But if Melissa wants to settle, then it's going to come with terms. Real ones. A signed confession about the false allegations. Full access to Emily without supervision. And Jeremy Clark out of her life. Or at least out of my daughter's home. Ken added, and the reimbursement of the funds transferred from their joint account to Mr. Clark. All of it. Or we move forward with a formal fraud complaint. The lawyer sighed, rubbed his eyes. She won't like it. She doesn't have to, I said. She just has to sign. When the meeting ended, I stayed in that room a little longer. The walls felt tighter now, the silence louder. I looked at the grainy photo Emily had drawn last year. Me in a uniform, her in a princess dress, both of us holding hands under a bright yellow sun. That drawing had kept me grounded through the worst of it. And now I wasn't just fighting to get back to her. I was almost there. Melissa didn't sign right away. For a few days, her lawyer went quiet. No emails, no calls. Ken said that usually meant one of two things. Either they were regrouping or they were unraveling. Turns out it was both. 3 mornings later, Ken forwarded me a voicemail he'd received from the opposing counsel. You could hear it in his voice, tired, stripped of the usual polish. My client is reconsidering her position. There are complications we didn't anticipate. I'll be in touch. The complications arrived later that afternoon in the form of a letter from the North Carolina Medical Board. They had opened a formal inquiry into Melissa's clinic after a tip about Jeremy Clark's access to confidential patient files. The tip hadn't come from me, but I had my guesses. Ken told me to stay focused. Let the truth do the work. You've already done your part. But it was hard not to watch it all fall apart from a distance. The custody agreement Melissa tried to manipulate into existence was crumbling in front of her. The emergency order vacated. Her credibility eroded. The judge had ordered a court-appointed child psychologist to speak with Emily. According to Ken, the session was brief. She told the therapist she missed you, he said during our weekly secure call, that you never made her feel scared, that she only said otherwise because she didn't want to make her mom mad. I sat in silence for a few seconds before responding. Did they believe her? They did more than that, Ken said. They put it on the record. That's when Melissa called. First time in months. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, not angry, scared. David, please. I didn't know it would go this far. I just didn't want to lose Emily. I made a mistake. We both did. Jeremy, he's not in the picture anymore. Just call me, please." I didn't call, because what she called a mistake was a coordinated attempt to erase me. What she framed as fear was calculated legal action filed the moment I stepped onto foreign soil. And what she now called regret only came after her lies unraveled. 3 days later, Ken received the signed documents, full retraction of all previous allegations, a joint custody agreement with an explicit clause stating that I was not to be restricted from contact again without formal judicial review, a refund of the transferred funds, and a final note. I acknowledge that the statements I made were not accurate, and I regret the distress they caused. Ken sent it to me without comment. I didn't celebrate. I didn't forward it to Rachel. I just stared at the words, reading them again and again until they blurred into gray. Melissa didn't lose because I fought harder. She lost because she underestimated how quiet a man can be while building the truth into a weapon. And now that weapon had spoken. 2 weeks later, the judge signed the final custody order. I received the PDF just after midnight local time, sitting alone in the chow tent with a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. The screen glowed in front of me, and for the first time in nearly 6 months, I felt something settle in my chest. Like the war, at least this one, was over. It wasn't just a document, it was an acknowledgement. A full reversal of the emergency order, shared legal and physical custody restored, and a written finding from the court stating there was insufficient evidence to support the original claims of abuse. In the language of the law, that's about as close as they come to saying we got it wrong. I emailed the signed order to my CO and started my paperwork for emergency leave. 3 days later, I stepped off a transport plane onto U.S. soil and didn't tell anyone I was home. Not Melissa, not even Rachel. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to Emily's school, where I waited outside until the bell rang. She was one of the last kids out. Blue hoodie, backpack slipping off one shoulder, dragging her feet like the day had been too long. Then she saw me. She froze. For a second, I wasn't sure what she would do. Then she ran. Full speed. No hesitation. Launched into my chest like she'd been holding her breath for months and finally let it go. "I knew you'd come," she whispered into my shoulder. "I told Mom you would." I didn't cry, not in front of her, but my voice cracked when I said, "I'm here, Bug. I'm home." Later that evening, Melissa met me in the parking lot of the school's administrative building. Her eyes were tired. She looked like someone who had spent months trying to control a story that had turned on her. "I want things to be peaceful," she said quietly. "Then stop lying," I replied. She nodded. No defense, no argument, just silence. Jeremy was gone. Melissa said he'd moved out a while ago. I didn't ask for details, didn't care. All I cared about was the little girl sleeping in the backseat of my rental, worn out from a day of school, and the emotional weight no child should ever carry. For the first time since this all started, I felt like a father again. Not a name on a deployment log, not a target in a custody strategy. Just her dad. The court would still monitor for 90 days. There'd be counseling sessions, guardian check-ins. Melissa had been ordered to complete a parental ethics course, but all of that felt small compared to the one thing I'd gotten back. Her trust. And this time, I didn't need a judge or lawyer to tell me I'd earned it. I moved out of Fort Bragg 6 months after my return. 20 years of service was enough. The Army had been my spine, my compass, the thing that gave me shape when I didn't yet know who I was. But I'd given it everything I had. It was time to come home in a different way. Emily and I settled in Asheville, North Carolina. Quiet town, clean air, decent schools. I found a little 2-bedroom place near the edge of the Blue Ridge. Nothing fancy, just enough room for us. A backyard big enough for a dog, and a workbench in the garage where I could take up woodworking like my dad used to. I kept the uniform, folded, pressed, in the back of the closet where Emily couldn't see it every day, because now I wasn't Sergeant Ellis. I was just Dad. The transition wasn't seamless. Emily had questions. Some she asked outright. "Why did Mom say you were scary?" Others she carried in her eyes, waiting for the right moment. I never blamed her. I just answered every question with patience, never once speaking badly about Melissa. I think Mom was scared, I told her once, as we sat on the porch watching the sky turn pink. Sometimes when people are scared, they do the wrong thing. Emily nodded like she understood more than she should have at 10 years old. Then she leaned her head against my arm. I never believed her, she said quietly. That was all I needed to hear. Melissa never tried anything again. The court order stayed in place. We exchanged Emily like clockwork. Civil, brief, quiet. Jeremy had disappeared entirely, and whatever hold he once had on her life seemed to dissolve with the truth. She moved to a nearby town and started over. I wished her no harm. I just didn't wish her anything anymore. Some nights, when the world was still and the air smelled like pine, I'd open a drawer in the kitchen where I kept a folded letter. Emily's handwriting, the one she hid in the book. I never framed it, never showed it to anyone but Ken and Rachel. But I read it from time to time, just to remind myself how close I came to losing everything, and how truth, when held steady and quiet, doesn't just survive, it wins. A year after the custody ruling, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph of a little girl I didn't recognize, standing on a porch next to a man in uniform. The note read, "You don't know me, but your story helped save our family. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for not giving up." I pinned it to the fridge next to Emily's school drawings. Somewhere along the way, the worst chapter of my life became a reason someone else kept their child. That mattered. I don't know if I'll ever remarry. I don't think about that much. These days, my world is smaller, quieter, but full. I make breakfast. I pack lunches. I build birdhouses I'll never sell and teach Emily how to sand the corners just right. And every once in a while, I sit under the trees and let the silence wash over me. Not the kind I knew in the desert, but the kind you earn, the kind that tells you, you made it.